Hey, what's up, you guys? How's it going? This is a quick pop-up chat in the stream for you guys. Hopefully, everyone's doing well. Gonna be hanging out here for a little bit, and we'll see what we can produce on the sketch page today. We're gonna be going straight into just more of just talking and sketching and drawing for our session. So let's get underway. First, let me just kind of adjust a couple things on the screen if I need to. It looks a little bit bright on the. Let me try switching out the lighting a little bit. I just want to see how this looks. Might be a little bit too dark on the screen. I'll go back to the way it was. Sorry, I'm just going to readjust a couple of things here. I haven't streamed in a little bit, so you have to give me a minute to readjust. Bring it down a little bit. Okay. Yeah, welcome for those of you. Like I said, in these kind of live streams that tend to be pop-ups, I just kind of post them up on my Instagram as to when we're just jumping on. Are spent here just for the hour or two, if less or more, depending on how we go, just to hang out, sketch, and talk, and converse on things and discuss things that you guys are interested in and curious about, need advice to, or opinions to, or just having conversation in general. In the meantime, I will be sketching, and we're using a bit of a larger format piece of paper here, and I'll kind of talk about what I'm going to be working on, why, and how. So let's see. Before we get into the actual sketching and drawing, I'll just give it a second for people to kind of settle in a little bit here. And I'm sure there are already some questions coming in. I'm just going to read them real fast, just so we have something to talk about as we get into the sketching. And I'll talk about some of the materials and the pens I'm using today, and then what I'll be drawing. So let's see. Luke had a question about the old paper drawing sketchbooks that you folded after your room was reorganized. Can I flatten them out, or can you still use them? Folded or crinkled sketch papers, or papers in general, can be reused if you can maybe even cut them down, right? Now, if they're bound or binded into things like spiral books or perfect bound books, it might be a little bit harder to do so because obviously they're stitched into the book itself. Sometimes in certain sketchbooks, I might even cut out the sheets as individual stacks and then kind of reformat them dimension wise if I want to get rid of some of the excess parts that are kind of damaged or something like that. That could be possible if they're left in the book. Of course, if you're okay with the folds and the crinkles that are there, nothing wrong with using them. Because if it's a sketchbook mostly for like note taking and warming up and stuff like that, then it doesn't really matter if the paper is a bit wrinkled up. If it's something more for presentation, you're scanning the pages, you're using them for some kind of printing thing, you're going to want something a bit more presentable. So that's more based on application, right, Luke? Let's see. Welcome, love. I'm glad you were able to sit and sketch with us tonight. And Farouk has a question. Is using reference mandatory for improving or not? Not mandatory, but very useful. I would say it's a standard approach for many professional artists who have begun in their days of training. For myself, references are something that I've used back then and even now. So nothing wrong with that. Whatever helps you understand things better to help you visualize stuff is what you have to use it for. Um, yeah, but you read so much about the ideas that people shouldn't use reference, but check your sources. You know, for me, I've been educating students now for over a decade, and college level to international levels to levels of all age ranges. I've worked in the industry for over 7, 8 years in inside studios. I work professionally now for 15. I've done stuff for all kinds of work applications, from concept art to graphic novels to illustration work, gallery shows, production, and also fashion. And in all states, the use of references is a highly resourceful thing. It's literally just a part of a process, right? It's not something to give you necessarily an answer to, but it can give you things of an idea of a direction. It gives you an actual idea of visualization of the picture to the intention of goal as to what you want to go with the actual piece. So there's so much to discuss when it comes to something like that, but I'll leave it there for now. Then, anyways, Happy New Year's for everybody who is joining in. This is our first live stream for the year of 2023. And today we're going to be using some pens as usual. These over here are the Fude type pens. These are the Fude Nosuke. We have a couple different brands. One here is Zebra Fountain, the Zebra Fude pen. These two are the Tombos. Tombow is a pretty common type of brand of pen that some of you guys may have used before. They normally make those really long kind of pens. I don't have it here on me right now, but it's still a good brand. And they make these kind of Fude pens as well too. Fude is basically a Fude Nosuke, Pen is mostly for calligraphy work, for Japanese and Asian calligraphy kind of styling of writing, but great for drawing and sketching. So it's a felt tip nib, but it's spongier, a little bit softer, but it retains a nice sharp point really nicely. This is a I want to say, what is that? Here it is, packaging. Yeah, Kuretake Fude pen also. So this one's in package. As you can see here, it says Fude, Fude pen. Kuretake is a brand that I use a lot of times for these style of pens. As I said, Tombow or Zebra and many other brands out there make these kind of pens. These are mostly for, again, for calligraphy style of work of writing and drawing. But I like to use it for just everyday kind of sketching. So these are, store bought. These are the kind of pens I would usually buy off of shelves these days. They're the only ones I really would invest in on. Felt tip pens I mostly use for classes, but I don't really use it for like personal use anymore. The pen over here is a fountain pen. This one's made by Esterbrook, the U.S. brand. This is, I believe, a fine nib, fine nib. It's a jumbo size, meaning it's actually a thicker base of the acrylic here for the handle. So a little bit thicker than normal fountain pens. But these two are pretty much the combination of tools I'm using for this round of sketching for this current piece I'm doing. So what we're going to be working on is actually a not small, but relatively decent sized illustration of two archers. And I'm doing this mainly because I'm collaborating with a Boyer, someone who makes archery bows. And he's making one for me, made one for me. And in trade and in collaboration, I'm actually doing pieces for him. One already I had done is this one. So this is a watercolor piece. This is done on kind of a lighter weight, kind of watercolor type paper. This is not like a super heavy stock. As you can see, it's pretty thin and foldable here. Normally, heavier stock are going to be like 300, pound paper. So this is not a particular brand that I know that well. This is actually in a spiral bound, as you can see over here. And I don't even know really the brand of this one. I picked it up at a Japanese stationery store. Let's see, there's a brand here, Art Spiral. Maruman is the name of the brand. Maruman. It's all in Japanese, so I don't really know the brand that well. I've used it already a little bit this last year, sketching and drawing inside of it. Again, this is a large format, piece of sketchbook. So I've done, pieces from, this is 2021 actually, so from last year to the year beforehand. So books like these, I would have offhand because I don't normally carry this kind of stuff around every day. So because of its really large format, I'll bring it out and use once in a while, and I put it back. And I have rotations of sketchbooks, so I'll have up to like 6 sketchbooks in rotation. Some smaller scale, some much larger, and others I'll kind of carry every day. Here's a 2022 piece. So it tends to alternate as I have certain applications for the book. This one in particular, like I said, I bought it just for testing and experimentation. I don't have a bunch of these kind of sketchbooks, these art spiral versions. I just wanted to see how it was. But it does handle ink and watercolors actually fairly well, despite it being quite thin of paper. You'll see that it doesn't really crinkle or bend and buckle up too much. And I use a lot of watercolor on this. So up close, you see it's just straight ink and watercolor. Paul had a question. You always have trouble with knowing what to draw. You get bored with what I've already done beforehand. What has been already done in itself? How would you deal with this problem? Well, the first thing about that is not thinking so much about the subject matter as to what you should be drawing, but getting into the act of wanting to sketch and draw, right? Having the enthusiasm and the energy for it. So the best thing to do sometimes is to start with something you are familiar with, things that you have done before, things that have been done prior, whether by you or otherwise, and using that as a way to kind of build up the gears and the system to kind of get going, to build the energy, enthusiasm, because you know how to draw those things. So what it does is you use it as a warm-up period. Maybe you only do like a half an hour of that, right? Sketch things or draw things that you like of certain characters, animals, or subject matter, or anything that you find very easy to get into because it puts you into the zone. And you put that stuff away and you go into something a bit more challenging or things to discover as a new subject or something to kind of learn from. So there's ways to look at it, right? Which is producing something that you're very familiar and comfortable with and something you can actually learn something from, which is very challenging. So what challenges you? What subject matters? People, animals, landscapes, props, products, machines. And then from there, go into the stuff that you find difficult after you get warmed up to it. So this is a piece I did for that archer as well too, the Boyer guy. This is one of the pieces he recommended or asked for, and he gave me the basically the parameters as to like what he'd like to have. He made me a nice Comanche bow. So he asked for a Boyer kind of a traditional styling with the smoke coming up with kind of a different sort of elements in the smoke over here. And he wants to use some of the stuff for like t-shirts and whatnot, which I'm happy to trade skills like this with people that I work with. So I need to do another one, and this one's gonna be black and white. It's going to be of two archers, one of a more of a European styling of longbow archer, kind of more classic, the medieval styling, but kind of more of a ranger type, right? And then next time is going to be more of an Asian style of archer. So he'll be Japanese, using those really long bows that the archers have, but back in the Japanese period, feudal period. So it'll be two figures next to each other. They're not going to be full figure; they'll be half figure. So from the torso up, because the guy who asked for this recommend or asked for also specifically where it would be a bit more of a graphical piece. So part of the clothing, the cape will cover the lower half of the body. So I'm going to try to find a way to organize them a little bit. I've done some early sketches beforehand, and I sent it over to him, so he has an idea as to like what he wants to go for. So usually in these kind of cases where I'm being asked to do something, whether it's client work, freelance work, or otherwise, I usually send them sketches. Now, normally you guys don't see this kind of stuff because when I post things on social media, you're normally seeing just the final thing. I just go in straight into the sketch and drawing and I finish it up. So you don't ever really see underlays or preemptive thumbnails because I don't do them. However, if I'm working with somebody, client, freelance, jobs, or even just collaborations like this, there's somebody wants something more specific. So in that situation, I'm going to send them some ideas because I could just do one piece. There's no reason why I couldn't. But the problem is, it may not be what that person wants. So if they say, well, that's a really great piece, but I want you to change that or change this because they want something more specific. Now, if I already finalize it and I have to go back and redo it again, then it's not really going to work. So I do send them some sketches, early thumbnails, small little pieces here and there, 4 to 5 or more if I can. And then from there, they'll say, oh, I like that one over here. Maybe you can add a little change on that part. So that kind of negotiation happens earlier on. So now I know what to do with this piece. Does that mean I know exactly what I want this image to look like? To a degree, actually, with this piece, I do. I know where I want them. I know what pose it's going to be in, straight on shot. It's going to be, pretty much a simple piece I'm going to do. It's not going to be that hard. But it took a bit of time to kind of make sure that the conclusion decision making came to that point. So what I'm going to do first is just kind of do some mark making. And this mark making, I'll kind of talk about what I'm doing here. Okay. So I placed in a couple of dots. You can't see them on the screen because obviously the resolution of the monitor won't pick it up on it. But I placed in a couple of dots here and there. These dots are essentially are reference points, landmarking points as to where the scale and the position of the image is going to go. I put a dot first right here, which you can't see, but I'm pinpointing it. Okay, so this will be the top of the head of one of the characters. There's a point down over here, which is going to be the bottom portion of the character also. The person is going to be holding a bow. So the bow is going to be horizontal, okay, coming down this direction. So I got to know the parameters as how long I want the bow to be. So I put a dot over here and a dot over there. So this now gives me basically a triangulation as to where this first character is going to be placed in. So then you might ask, like, why don't you just do a pencil underlay? Why don't you just sketch it loosely in a pencil and you can kind of ink it afterwards? Nothing wrong with that approach. People that use that system of illustration can produce obviously beautiful things. Nothing wrong with that method. For myself personally, I find I produce better things by going straight ink. Because by going underlay with pencil, what tends to happen is that I tend to overwork it, and I go with their ink and I tend to stiffen up. I don't retain the looseness that I want from a kind of a energetic standpoint into the ink as well too. So usually you'll see this in things like graphic novels. Somebody will do a pencil and they'll ink it, but the inking looks a little bit weird and stiff and kind of like flat. It's because inking technique doesn't really produce that kind of energy that you want to go for. So let's just establish where his head's going to go here. He's going to be in a hood. So even like little mistakes and movements of lines that, are kind of whatever, I'm also going to zoom in more so you can see it better. I want the key because I'm not looking And not that the image has to be this overly pristine, clean thing, and even if it was, that's fine. But it's more about my mental state as I'm producing the sketch. The more I'm trying to restrict the movement and control this too much, it doesn't tend to produce a sketch or a piece that I'm very fond of. So I like to maintain a little bit of looseness if I can. So in any case, hopefully the start of this kind of established some ideas as to like how I'm working on this particular piece. So we're basically sketching two archers, one archer with a longbow, European styling. Another archer next to him would be Asian styling. I'm gonna have this cloak cape thing wrap around this direction off to the shoulder. Because of his positioning, I'm probably gonna actually angle the bow up this way more because I don't want to end the I don't want to hit the edge of the paper here. So I'm starting from the top of the head and I'm working my way down. It doesn't really matter where I typically start, but here with this one, I'm just starting with the head. It's more the cloak, if anything else. He'll have a back quiver here. And with just part of the clothing, you'll see some details preemptively. Bread Pyro was asking, did I post a picture of the bow anywhere? I did post it on my Instagram not too long ago. It was more of a quick, I think, story, if anything else. I haven't done an official post on it just yet, but it was a Comanche style bow, which is a short bow. Native Americans here, the Comanche, were notorious for their horsemanship and their archery skills. And they had a very specific style of bows that they made, especially in terms of the design, the shape, language, the scale, the size of it, and the shooting style as well too. So he made me one of those. As some of you may probably already know, I've been really into archery lately. So he was someone I connected with on Instagram and social media. He's based up in Canada, and I bought one of his bows that he made for me for the first round, and then we talked a lot about maybe working together, doing some collaboration. So now he made a second bow, which was the Comanche bow. So then I'm now doing these illustrations for him. So his left arm's gonna come to the front over here, come down this direction. Hand will probably end up ending about there. I'm gonna turn the bow this direction at an angle slightly because I want the composition to go up this way so that the bow itself will almost link to the other archer's bow, the Asian bow, that's this direction. It's gonna be like this kind of crescent arc over here. So I'm already visualizing like where things are gonna be placed in. Carson's asking, you're almost 15. You've been learning from books like Michael Hampton's. You wanted to try Jeff Watt's online course on the core fundamentals, which includes some anatomy. Do you think this is a good idea? Well, I don't really have a strong opinion, nor can I give you advice on that, mainly because I haven't taken any of those courses. I know of Michael Hampton, I know of Jeff Watts, but I don't know their systems and methods that well, meaning that I haven't learned from them. So, because I don't really have the experience behind it, I don't like to tell you what I think on what people should do in a situation. What I can talk about is it a good idea to experience things just in general based on curiosity? Then yeah, absolutely. If you have the finances, the time, and the interest and curiosity, it's not going to be in any way of detriment to you in your experience. Because if you're passionate about it, if you're committed to it, no matter who you go to, whatever artist or system you have, as long as you put the time in, you'll get something out of it. So my suggestion then is, yeah, go for it and see how it is, by your own experience. Because no matter then if I did even had experience behind it, my thoughts and suggestions are only of mine. So it doesn't reflect on how it would be for you. So the best thing to do is discover it yourself. So we have an upper sleeve section over here. He's gonna have across the chest strap. And we'll have his forearm coming down. He'll have like a leather gauntlet glove. So we're just gonna do a bunch of lining first, and then we'll kind of fill in some shadows and darks and details in a minute. Also, for those that are trying to ask questions, if you're not subscribed to my channel, I turned on a feature where only people that are subscribed can ask questions because I don't want there to be things like a bunch of spam and stuff like that coming in. The last couple of streams have had a lot of that kind of stuff come in. So by turning on this feature, I'm hoping to minimize that. So if you want to ask a question, all you got to do is subscribe to my channel, and then you can interact. So I'm going to turn his hand this direction a little bit. Front index knuckle is going to be here. I lead with the knuckle into the index finger, and I block out the rest of the hand, and I group the other fingers together. The thumb will be slightly raised. That will give me the angle for the bow itself. Come out this way. To get the bow, I'm going to reposition the paper a little bit. I'm just going to ghost the movement. We'll end it here. By ghosting the movement, what I'm doing is I'm basically giving a feel of the position of where the line of the bow should be. So sorry. So when I do these kind of movements and not drawing a line, it's because I'm trying to get in a feel of the position of where the line is. This kind of action is something I would recommend for a lot of people to do, especially if you're training your skills of line work, hatching, or building construction straight pen. Because you don't know exactly where things are going to be because you're not doing an underlay, by ghosting the action of something, you're able to get a feel as to where it needs to angle, what the line direction needs to go for, how amount of pressure and speed you want to go for too. So here, as I'm ghosting, I'm getting a feel of the line. Now placing the line, going this direction. So the end of the bow will be here. Ghost. Ghost it. So I get a feel of it, essentially. So the hard one now is going to be the position of the right hand because he's going to hold his arrow and our hand's going to be turning downwards like this, basically, where he's holding it, pulling it like that. So I got to actually turn his hand inwardly. And this also has a position where the arrow will go as well too. So the thumb will come up this direction. Index finger. And the arrow itself will go this direction. Middle finger. Ring and the pinky finger behind that. And I'll be using shadow shapes to help separate some of the elements. Now, from this distance, you probably can't see the hand that well, but this kind of stuff, what really helps a lot is what I just did. I kind of held my hand in the position of the way I would want the archer to actually pull the string and hold the arrow itself by going through physical actions like an actor would do through animation as well too. It gives you an idea of visual as to like where things will go in position, the angling of like the arm or the hand or any sort of body posing you're trying to go for. The best thing to do is actually just to get up or to move around yourself. The more you go to the action of something, like if I want somebody to like go in a fighting pose, it's like then you want to be able to feel like, well, how high does the hand come up? Does it go all the way to the head, or is it like a boxer? Is it more like coming down here? Is it in a different kind of martial arts styling? And you can watch a lot of movies or photographs and imitate that sense of motion. And what that does is it gets you the sense as to where things are. Having it from your own POV, you're able to like lock in on where things are spatially. So when you try to do it two-dimensionally, you're able to give yourself at least an idea as to where things will go. So if that's something you haven't really done before, it's something I would recommend you try once in a while, especially like standing poses that are a bit more intricate. I understand you might not be able to hold a certain pose based on something of fantasy, but you're able to at least imitate it to a certain degree. Ideally, even things like photography work, taking your own references, setting up shots would help tremendously. I used to do this with a friend of mine back in high school. We'd over just like hang out together, and we'd be talking about drawing characters and poses, and we'd even do a session like we'd go outdoors and we just do like photography work. We actually use real cameras and film. We have to go actually develop it and stuff like that. But it was really cool to have little references of shots of us like running or throwing a punch or holding weapons and stuff like that. We would do this. So the cloak is going to go around this direction. Form's going to come up this way. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm actually getting over a little bit of a sickness, so I'm going to be clearing my throat once in a while. A little bit of agitation still. A lingering sickness. It wasn't COVID. It wasn't the flu. It was just a cold, a regular cold, but one that kind of stuck with my head a little bit. We'll do the face last. I'm not really concerned about the face. Let's do the feathers on the arrow. Okay, so this piece of the clothing is going to turn this direction and cover the bottom part of the leg and turn up that way. The string will be connected here to here, just lightly drawing it in. And we'll somewhat stylize this piece of material, of the cloth. When I say stylize, it kind of moves away from the realism of how things move, how they feel weighted, or even the material type. It'll move in its own kind of characteristic of way. Question over here is, you remember hearing in an interview with me that the number one thing you see people messing up on is scale and proportion. You found that to be incredibly true across the board for most all scale levels. Yes, it's something that I still mess up on now. Proportion and scale is incredibly difficult to control. Like even in the situation right now, I have this one character sitting right here. I have another character going to be next to him, holding a bow, shooting it that direction. His scale, it's got to be closely matched to what his sizing is well too. I can end up drawing a character too big or too small, and it ends up looking a little bit. It takes you out of the image. Now you can do it graphically where it's situated where it's not actually two characters existing within the same space. It's just an illustration of a collage of images, so they can be of any scale you wanted to. Think about like the old Capcom, Street Fighter posters where you have a bunch of characters on a sheet. It's a character sheet essentially. Um, anyways, but yeah, proportion scaling very tough. So let's see. We're gonna have a go. I'm just making sure the screen you can see the images. We're gonna go this way. With the arrow end here. And I'm going to have this cloak move with the flow. Again, stylistically, that means the shape design is going to be something that is not natural to the real world, but I'm stylizing it to make it visually look a bit more interesting and dynamic. So in reality, that wouldn't happen with the cloth. Sorry, I need to move this. What I'm also going to do here is, let me zoom back out again. And I'm going to just shift the camera down a little bit. Sorry for the movement. Okay, hopefully that's okay. Natalia, welcome. I'm glad you're able to take a break and sketch along with us. Hopefully you're doing well and had a good break and holiday as well too. Last I saw you was at Lightbox. Reach out anytime you need. Waist cloth right there. Let's actually have that back end cloak going in this direction. Also moving behind this piece. So he's relatively set and secure. A couple arrows on top of here. I will be going back and obviously refining this and adding darks and details and whatnot. But in terms of establishing the overall relative image is pretty much done. We'll put the face in there in just a moment. Question here is Farouk asks, is there a general advice on how to prevent cloth looking too stiff? Well, a lot of the times it's making sure you understand how to manipulate the shape of the material. So a way to think about it is, let me grab. I just draw on the back of this. This is a scrap piece because there was something on the other side that I didn't want. I do this in my character development classes and figure drawing classes, but cloth can be thought of as three different ways. One is a taut piece of flat material, which is stretched out. Think of it like a flag or something like that. That's kind of flat on the table. You can then also move it with curves. So I call this the flow. Think of it like a scarf or a ribbon. So materials can be manipulated in several different ways, being flat like this, and then in flow, and then you can also fold it. These are three different ways the material can move. Now you can also mix and match certain things, but you have to understand how the material can also interact in ways through gravity, right? So if I have a piece of material hung across two sides, and I have folds, and there's a whole topic of discussion lecture that I do based on folds and wrinkles and whatnot, and we have it drape at the end of it. It can flow or it can fold. Now, if I had like a character, let's say I just drew a head, and he's wearing some kind of like scarf, that thing can flow with organic movement. So this becomes now where I'm taking a piece of material and I can do the flow type of ribbon, but then start to manipulate in ways that are a bit more abstract in a way. So what this does, it kind of elevates the sense of energy of movement, where it's not realistic, but it can also heighten the feeling of it. So the range of level, how much you can do that, of course, can be within a spectrum. You can make it more realistic and be much more stylized. That's up to you. So here, this cape flowing this direction is slash realistic to stylized, right? So Zenistrom is asking, when drawing a box, I'm assuming you're talking about just a cube. How can you tell if it's a one-to-one cube? Well, one side of a cube to the other has to be equal, right? So if I drew a cube, well, first let's talk about a box. We're talking about the idea of a perfect square. So one side of the square to the other side of the square have to be equal, one to one, the same length. Now you can just use a ruler for this and measure out like half an inch or 1 inch or whatever sizing dimension of the square you want to go for. And so that has to be obviously one to one. So then the other side of it, symmetry wise, will reflect the same. It'll be one to one. That would be a perfect square. So in a cube, you would essentially do the same thing, but you can actually project it. In perspectives, you would actually have this and you would actually project it down to a perspective plane. And that way you can actually then get that one to one square to be inside of that three-dimensional plane itself for the cube itself. So that's really the one way to find it, is to take something like this and to project it down into the perspective plane for you to actually do the perspective in. Again, there's a whole lesson for that you have to actually go through the steps to. But tools are necessary at that point. Rulers, protractors, triangles, you're going to need all those things. By hand, it would be impossible. By eye, this is just an estimate. This is not true, you know. So if I don't know the trueness of a square, if I don't measure it, you can't transfer that data down to something in perspective. So tools are 100% necessary in that case. So in perspective classes, typically you'll be using, hand tools, or if you're using Photoshop, you can copy and paste things. So let's see. Brendan Krause is also asking, any thoughts about controlling the level of detail, especially for folds? It's also dependent upon like how much, I guess, energy and movement you want to throw into. If I added a bunch of hatching and lines down over here, it creates a lot more visual noise of action, but sometimes it can feel overworked. So sometimes you also want to say, well, my area of interest and focus is going to be right here. So maybe I don't really need as much information down on this portion than maybe, where I wanted to place it. So that can be also based on dictation as to where you want the eye to go, right? But it doesn't mean you're not allowed to push the level of information of details within that part if you want to. That's your choice. But when it comes to something like that, when it comes to detail levels, it's really about making sure you are achieving what you want to visually communicate, right? If you're just lost, then you're just randomly doing things or acting without thinking, then obviously you're going to lose track as to what you want to go for. Then it becomes overworked to the point where you feel it's unintended, right? So intention, when it comes to that with detail level, is probably one of the bigger things. How much do you actually want? Do you know? Well, how do I find out? Well, research things. Research other people's illustrations, other people's work. What do they do? How much information do they give? What parts of aesthetics levels do I like to follow with, right? And then from there, it helps you kind of settle upon a focus as to what fits within your parameter. Let's throw in a head over here. He's gonna have a beard. Once we establish a certain level of information with this guy, we're not going to finish him all the way through. We're going to move into the secondary character, and we'll come back to him in just a minute and finish up on any darks and shadow shapes within this. Movements of line, interconnecting things. Again, these kind of lines don't actually exist on fabric and materials, but they're movements of lines of action that I like to have to retain the energy and the flow of things. Vanzer, this is a archer that we're drawing, and this is a piece for illustration for a friend of mine who's making bows for me. So he wanted a couple pieces of illustration that he could be using for things like shirts and whatnot. So we're doing a European styling of archery here, a longbow, and then I'm going to do an Asian archer over here, Japanese styling. And we'll put that character over here. Put his head up top. He's going to have a headband, top knot. Now, because he's going to be actually drawing a full draw, his hand will be coming to the side of his chin for the anchor point. And I think in Japanese archery, they pull back much farther, actually, behind the ear or something like that. So it's not like European archery or medieval draw where, like in recurve bows, they'll actually draw with three fingers and they kind of pull to an anchor point, usually around the corner of their mouth or the chin or the back of the ear. So that's kind of European styling of draw. But with the Asian style, even Japanese, I believe they do a thumb draw. So I think they pull it really far back. So there can be a position where the hand's going to go. But that means that the actual arrow is going to overlap his face, like here. So that means the arrow has to also come over this direction. This is the kind of stuff that makes it difficult in sketching, I would say, for most people, which is about being able to sketch these kind of overlaps. This is why then most people would want to do an underlay, right? By drawing it in pencil, you would do like the character first, and then you would draw on top of things that say like overlaps of the hand or like even this arrow going across the face, because you don't have to predict where things are going. You're able to just draw on top of that, right? And you just erase it out after you do an inking. So that kind of placement of information, especially if you don't think about it, visualize it beforehand, it's really hard to predict where it's going to go. Because how do I know if that's the right spot? What if it's too high? What if it's too low? What if it's not the right angle? And that makes it very scary, to commit to, because that's what it requires, a commitment to the thing, to know that that's where I want it to be. Uh, how do I get to this point? Tons of practice, right? Just nothing but practice, if anything else. That's really the key answer. There is no shortcut. There's no thing I could tell you based on like some kind of skill that you learn as a way to perfectly visualize everything, because I can't. I'm confident, but I'm not 100% saying that that's going to be true, but so then what happens if I mess it up? Well, I'll find a way to adapt with it and make it work, and maybe it's off a little bit, maybe not exactly where I want it, but it's going to be good enough. And that can be enough for me to move forward on. If it's a complete failure, at that point, to be like, well, then yeah, just accept it and then move on and try it again, right? Jonathan's asking, do you have any tips for line confidence interconnecting lines in one go? Again, by actually doing it. If you sat there thinking about trying to build line confidence and visualizing what that technique is, by not physically putting hand to paper, then you're not gonna ever really feel it. Because it's not only just about being able to visualize it in your mind and to be able to picture what's going on and to think about what it feels like, you gotta actually feel it. So to feel the movements, there's a certain, it's not even just the tool that responds to the paper, it's the decision making that you put into the movements that you have to be able to feel where it feels correct or it feels off. um, you build a sensitivity to this idea. You're a little bit numb to it at first because you don't know if that choice of moving here or there is right or wrong, but eventually as you do it enough, you feel the aesthetics, the I guess the nuances of those movements that feel right or wrong. So should I move a lot or less, or turn hard or turn less, and become so sensitive that you're able to adapt with it in the immediate motions and thoughts, where it's not about actually making a conscious decision, but your hand has already made that choice because of practice. So it's muscle memory, right? Let's get this arrow out all the way this direction. Let's finish out his face. So his hand's gonna be way back here. Hand's probably gonna be covered up by this other archer. They usually have like thick gloves on as well too in Japanese archery. Just the base shapes, silhouettes, and you'll see he's gonna be wearing traditional Japanese armor. See the shoulder piece up here. I'll get to some more questions in just a moment here. Once I establish the rest of this upper piece, we're gonna give him a piece of material cloth, just like we just practiced with the materials, movement, flow. And his arm's gonna come out this direction. This is the upper armor on the chest. Waist sash band. We'll actually give him a sword as well too. Got a lot more questions here. Let's see. Marzuk is asking, what would you emphasize? What would you put emphasis on developing as a main building blocks of a progressive system of drawing slash art, and what are you focusing on developing, incorporating at the moment? In terms of what emphasis I would put on the main building blocks is about being able to visualize shape and form, right? It's a fundamental in terms of what I teach. Not a perspective, to be able to just visualize form at first, shape and form, manipulate those things. You can actually draw forms, three-dimensional things without perspective at first, right? To be able to visualize structure, understand methods of building blocks within that, layering system of sketching and drawing. Then, of course, you incorporate things like perspective and other classes that are subject-based, things like figure or animals or vehicles, whatever the case is, and using those systems of perspective and building structure and form to emphasize better things like space, which is what perspective was to be. But that's where I would put most of my time. In the beginning, when I was drawing as a kid, we don't really think about that. We just copy what we see. If I see an illustration or a photograph of something, I would just copy it one to one. I don't think about what shapes and forms there are. I just try to imitate the things of details that I transfer over. But as I went into college, of course, to classes like dynamic sketching and viscom classes, which helped me build more of the idea of visualizing shapes and forms. Perspective was, of course, taken beforehand, but a lot of the times I was drawing those things without the use of perspective, really. Um, it's about me being able to just control the idea of shape and form to the interpretation of what I saw. And right now, in terms of what I'm trying to build towards, uh, is being able to release myself from some of the constraints of methods and techniques. Because as I've trained myself for over 20 years, in drawing techniques and methods from my college days to my youth to now, and I've been teaching it for over a decade. I've always felt now that I've felt a bit constrained by it, that is it now becomes so ingrained into my system that I'm unable to truly express, right? Let's say an action or a pose or a shot or a composition or a character or personality or something through the work. So trying to find ways of even unlearning some of the things I've learned is what I'm trying to go for. Not because I'm not saying those things aren't working, but I'm trying to find a way to also integrate things that go beyond that. And sometimes some things have to be let go to basically empty the cup a little bit, right? But that's hard because when you're trained in your ways for so long and you become so muscle memory oriented, it's very difficult to relinquish some of that control to incorporate some new things that might be out of your comfort zone. Because I've always been so much based on things of techniques and logics of things. So for me to actually try something that is much more, or not necessarily organic, I want to say that, but expressive, maybe, it's hard. When I used to draw when I was younger in college, everything was about you know everything in the right spot. The line work, the shapes, the forms, and if it was off, crumple it up and throw it away. Um, and over the years, I have been looser and looser about a lot of my stuff that I go for. So it's no longer about everything has to be in the right spot. It's about a shape or a line or expression to feel something, right? Not feel something only based on what you see, but also when you're actually producing it. But I always still have the muscle memory. I'll always still have that training to be able to fall back on. Uh, but they're just personal thoughts now. Who knows is asking, is the way the cloak is moving on purpose to hide the legs? Yes, because that's what the client wanted. The person who asked for this piece that I'm collaborating with requested this to happen. Was left-handed drawing hard to pick up? Yes, and it's still hard to do, but I still like doing it once in a while. Acrimona is asking, would the scribble method work if you're unsure how to lay out your proportions, like working in light ink, then building up to dark? I wouldn't necessarily call it scribbling, but I would definitely say you explore, right? And yeah, so to answer the question, yes, it could be good to kind of lightly go through and find some motions and movements to explore the shape and the form, and then to be able to refine that through layers. So the Japanese bow is going to be a little bit short on the bottom end over here, and the top end really goes high up like this. And when he's drawing it, the line would go this direction. It's going to go off the screen, but it's okay. So now we'll have that flow going up this direction. Question here is, any suggestions on who I should learn from to further understand color and value? Um, well, I would say if you go to the brainstorm school, there's an instructor named Mo Kim, who teaches color theory. And I don't know Mo that well, and I haven't really taken the class, but from the stuff that I've seen from the course, it looks pretty nice. But there's other schools like CDA and CGMA that also offer like things of classes on color theory and color exploration. Question here is also, what's the best paper for Copics? Just marker paper actually, and marker paper exists mainly because it's great for blending. Any other kind of paper is going to be a bit more absorbent, which isn't very good for blending markers. So I would use straight up marker paper first. Just a few details within these areas. And he's going to be wearing little plated armor. So interesting comment from Falls is that it's cool to think that drawing is like music. You can just think and draw. It's not just think; it's about feeling again, right? Because what I just discussed about the idea of me looking to explore the other things of my own, kind of building blocks. I think music is probably the better analogy because with music, you can learn the not the material. I was about to say material and tool, but the instrument, which is your tool, right? And then you can learn the notes. You can learn all the methods and classical themes and whatnot. But from there, the great thing about music is that you can also just express through sound. I mean, we can say almost like jazz in a lot of ways, right? Where there can be structured music, but there can also be something where you're based on movement, flow. So drawing can be seen in the same way as well too. You can find something of a structured method of approach, which gives you an outcome each and every time, and you can fluctuate and manipulate things slightly differently to give you different results. But you can also then flow and kind of explore through it and just move. And it's not to say that you're hoping for the best either. You're confident through those movements because you're so clear about the tool sets and your muscle memory to fall into the confidence of letting those things just kind of work together, right? ARG illustrations. I'm glad you were able to get the book. It's awesome. So, you're saying you have a digital course on perspective with Aaron Blaze, and those kind of courses. And Aaron's a great guy. He's a great instructor, but it's not an actual course. It's a series of videos, tutorials, and it's great information, but it's not like a real class. So I don't necessarily call those courses or classes because they don't actually incorporate interaction or feedback. And if it does, great. Then nothing to say beyond that. But if it doesn't, which most of Aaron's content does not, um, then it's a little bit one-sided, and you're unable to really incorporate it fully as you would like to because perspective is difficult. And having someone there hands-on to show you like some of the things that apply and don't apply practically is kind of important to have. So I would even think about taking something a bit more hands-on if you can afford it. But of course, most people can't. So then these tutorial videos are probably your best route. But do know that it has certain limitations. And one of the things about it is that it takes more time because you have to go through it so often yourself just to even get a handle of what's going on. So it takes longer to fully integrate. Let's put the other part of the face here. Okay, so now that I have all the elements within this piece, what I'm going to do is switch it over to a different pen real fast. Let's test out this Kuretake one. I'm going to go in there and start to darken up some areas. We'll push some line weight and we'll go into some shadow shapes. Let's see, let's get any of the questions here. Welcome, Daniel-san. Jonathan's asking, ever since I became a teacher and take commissions and work, do I find time to make my own personal art? Oh yeah, absolutely, all the time. Most of the stuff I post on social media, well, practically all of it, is, all just personal sketches and work I do on my own time. What I'm going to do here is also zoom in on this image because you can then see a bit closer to the specifics and details here. Sorry, I don't have my remote control. It's not set up right now for it, so I have to go up and touch the camera. Excuse me as I move some things here. Let's try like that. Now, what you're going to take note at this stage of this piece is that we're trying to get into the areas of where there's like shadow shapes, inside the cloak over here, the hood, around the hair and whatnot. And this particular pen has a heavier side, a thick side. And you might wonder, like, well, why don't you just fill it in with the thick brush side? Well, it's because the strokes don't match to the lines that I've established it with. And it just visually doesn't really combine well together. So when I fill dark areas in, I tend to use the same kind of line strokes, but of course, using things like hatching systems and fills with multiple strokes, it retains the line control, the line feel throughout the unity of the entirety of the piece. So we're going to push a bit of a heavier line weight around the silhouettes of the characters. So these kind of little shadow shapes inside here are basically to refine the image, add additional, contextual details. It doesn't feel overly worked at times, and small little, deep recessed areas of the subject matter that I'm kind of putting darks into, or overlaps, and even like cast shadows as well too. So it's not super complicated. It's like what I'm trying to do here. And some of this stuff is also not based on the idea of how realistically it would work. So I'm also designing shapes that go in here to add to the aesthetic value. When is the second Dynamic Bible coming out? Hopefully at the midpoint and maybe fall of this year. I'm actually gonna get it started maybe in the next month or so. I would like to get it done in terms of all the images and sketchwork and notes by, I want to say, March. So that way the book design, marketing, printing will sort of get done by July, I would hope. It'd be nice if I can get it for Comic Con this year. So as I fill, I will also use hatching to soften edges, blend. This is not getting watercolored. This is going to stay black and white because that's what the client wanted. This one's black and white. The one I did color on was this one I showed earlier. This was the colored one. So I did two pieces for him, one watercolor piece and one black and white piece, which is this one. Jonathan's asking random question: what lead hardness do I prefer? Well, in high school, the main preference was 2B lead. Always, I was always on the hunt for new 2B lead, and I would mainly use mechanical pencils when I was younger. Today, I like going a little bit softer. If I was using certain pencils, like 4B is nice, but 2B is always really good. Now, of course, as we're streaming today, today was also registration time for classes that I'm offering. So if anybody's interested in actually taking classes with me, types of classes that are offered are things like dynamic sketching, the figure-based class. I have a design class of characters as well too. And two types of classes or positions that are available are the full seats and the sit-in seats. And the sit-in seat people are able to participate, watch the lectures, ask questions, do the homework, but I only give feedback to the people that are fully registered. But the great thing about the full seat or the sit-in seat is because of the pricing being a fraction of the cost. It's a great way to maintain a community of artists, to build a schedule of your own to work within, and to have an environment for you to continue to be creative. So I have a lot of people that always come back to the sit-in seat. And so that's up right now, available through my website. So if you go there, you'll find classes available, and that opened up today. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of like this, where I'm drawing, usually on digital stuff, and on camera at times as well too. Doing a lot of questions and answer like this one here. But I do have a Discord community for my classes, and that has like hundreds of people on there. And so that's a main area of location where people tend to stay connected. They're always pushing each other, giving a lot of feedback, and it's perpetually growing. So one of the benefits of taking my class is not even just taking the class itself, but also to be in part of a community that built up. I just remember there was a question earlier. I had missed it. Something about I don't want to scroll back through, but I just remember reading it and not answering it. So I apologize if I missed this. I'm trying to remember what the context was a question to. Um, Dang it! If I think of it, I'll try to answer the question. I apologize if I missed the question. If whoever's listening on and I didn't reply to yours, just ask again. Can I do a video on watercolor technique? Well, I teach watercolor techniques in my classes. Um, but do I have videos on it? I mean, in my live streams, I'll use it. So that's the best way to watch it, Daniel. Vans, I do smoke a pipe occasionally, not a lot. But I just like Cavendish, tobacco. Pretty simple, straightforward, basic, but good. I'll have a cigar once in a while, once every couple months. Uh, I smoke my pipe usually like if I'm on vacation or going somewhere, and even then I only smoke it once, if then. So I'm not a regular, but I do enjoy it. I like the practice of it, the hobby of it, more than anything else. Yeah, Ryan, how's it going? Hopefully the guitar is going out well. Laurie is asking, what are my thoughts on the old ink masters like Franklin Booth, Joseph Clement Cole, and Bernie Wright's from his Frankenstein days? I mean, what do you want to know about them? Because that's a very general question that I could spend literally an hour on talking about these guys, and also artists of all types of that genre. Inking specific artists. But those three in particular are highly regarded in terms of how I look at them. Um, you know, I have specifics in terms of what I think about them as well too. But if you have something more specific to ask, it'd be great because I can't spend an hour talking about them. But maybe expand on that question if you can. So, question here is: do I have classes that you can jump in on in your own pace in free time, practicing from shapes, lights, perspective, form, progress, step by step as a beginner hobbyist? Well, you can do this sit and seat, which is less of a financial risk, and you're able to come to the class and watch and participate and listen and rewatch the videos many times as much as you want to, and be a part of the Discord where you're not demanded of actually submitting homework every week, but you can just be there, right? We're gonna go into the folds and the wrinkles and the clothing here. And we're just going to use hatching to fill these in. I'm going to be doing some cross hatching here as well too, which is different to hatching. Okay, if you're asking about the Discord, you have to register for the classes, and I send that link over to people after they register. Usually, there's a welcome email about 2 weeks after. So if you're already signed up for classes, that'll come soon. One friend is asking how often do I, offer classes in a year? 4 times. So this is our first session out of four in the year. Each session is about 8 weeks long. Well, yeah, Dimension. I try to use shadow shapes in a more cinematic way. So I like the film noir styling and heavy shadow shapes and whatnot. I'll use it to a restrictive level. It's not like super heavy, but enough to really kind of help draw the eye in certain areas and graphically kind of organize some things. So inside these pockets, I'm gonna go heavy shadow shapes. Fill like this. I do a hatching, then a crosshatch. And these kind of shadow shapes are great for creating silhouette, framing certain elements, separating some objects from each other, creating a better overlap read. Omid asked if I iterate on my designs nowadays, or would I consider yourself experienced enough where you get it right from the get go? No, so the very beginning of this, um, I guess, illustration of the stream, I talked a lot about that in terms of how I started this particular piece. Obviously, in this illustration, in this live stream, I went straight in ink to produce this, but there was a lot of prep work that came beforehand. So later on, when this is reposted, you can watch the beginning again. It'll explain how I got to this. Oops, I don't want to be out of frame, so excuse me. Sorry. If I'm drawing out of frame, just let me know in the chat, and I'll adjust. PC had asked, do I have any friends or relatives that don't understand my job or have a wild misunderstanding of what I do? Do you have any funny stories where they ask you to paint a room or something? Family or friends? Well, I think the majority of my family now is very clear on what I do because I've been doing it for long enough at this point. In the beginning, I would say, when I was a student going into the professional career, my parents probably had a slight remote idea as to what it might be. Um, so of course, I would try to explain it, but if anything else, over time, the visual examples of producing work, showing it to them, then gave them a better idea as to what I was trying to go for, which I understand as being a student today, trying to help your support system of family or friends to help them understand what it is you're even trying to do here. You're trying to sell them on it, right? Because I think the general kind of like ideas of what an artist is still to this day in the general public's mind is still someone who's like a starving artist, right? Or it's like, oh, you're an animator. You work in animation or work in games. You're an animator for some reason. So I mean, that's what they know. That's the level of their industrial, kind of understanding. But of course, I have to explain. It's like, well, no, I'm not the one animating it. I'm the one creating the visual for someone to then animate it eventually, whether it's in a game or animation or whatever the case is. Um, Today's a little bit easier. I talk about a little more about the educational side of things, so I'm more of a teacher now. I still work in illustration and do things like this, so they understand what those parts are. But any funny stories behind that? Not really. Mainly because of the people that I knew as friends. All have similar upbringings, and their friends and families are also coming through the same kind of route, and so they eventually got a better understanding of it through education by seeing it happen in front of them. Um, But a lot of times it's more the general public, right? That tends to kind of say certain things that they don't understand fully as to like what it is you do. And so when you try to explain it to them, they have a very perplexed expression on their face, not really understanding it. Um, yeah, pretty common for all of us who draw or sketch or design, illustrate. I'm sure of stories like that, which it's coming down to the explanation process of trying to help them understand what it is you're trying to do or wanting to do. Bread Pirate's asking, would you ever get comments from people telling you not to bother learning stylized art? Every time post manga practices, somebody tells you not to bother. Um, I have no problem with it. uh, if you want to learn stylized art, then you learn by copying stylized art, right? Um, However, I would say the other side to that coin is that we have to be careful of is where you start to pigeonhole yourself within just only that approach of learning, right? So you want to learn fundamental techniques that are standardized within our art industry of practice. Things like the basics of trying to practice good proportion, shape and form, perspective and line control, materials, color, light, um, anatomy, all those things are the basics and fundamentals. Stylization is just another subcategory within the understanding of all those basics. Um, so there's no classes on learning how to stylize, really, right? But we take those fundamental practices and we're able to adapt them to certain mediums that need a certain style for it to sell a certain way. So how do we find those styles? Is by looking at trends and things that we like growing up with. So for me, I used to copy all the time of styles. I can imitate styles right now, to this point. It doesn't mean I'm only able to just do that. It doesn't mean that I got stuck to just imitation, right? But I learned through the practice of stylization of imitation, and I'm able to move away from that to then incorporate it to my own means. With I guess, this side of intent, knowing what I'm trying to do, actually stylize it for. Stylization is not really the key on how you get work. You need to be able to have the fundamental strength to adapt to styles because nobody hires you for your own style in the industry. If it's more for things like your personal work and if you're printing and publishing your own stuff, then a style can somewhat matter, illustration or otherwise, because they're buying based on your visual look and basically voice or fingerprint of what you place into the styling of your work. It's got to have certain signs and elements that signify your style. But if you're working in the industry of things like games or animation or a company or something like that, your style does not matter because what matters is can you adapt to their style. It's their brand that you got to be able to do. So stylization is not as important when you go that route, but it doesn't mean it's not wrong to just practice styles because you're interested in it, right? But it shouldn't overtake nor negate your ability and also focus on building other fundamental skills. So yeah, you shouldn't feel bad by saying, I want to just maybe either copy a style or develop my own style. You should never deny yourself that. But all I'm saying is balance is key, right? So if people out there are telling you this, they're either telling you this mainly because of two things. One, they're biased to it because they have a school of thought or camp, which I don't agree with, or they're uneducated. They don't know. They're just people that assume. So we have to be careful there. And usually the ones that are biased, or it's because they come from a certain training, they come from a certain time period. Maybe they're a little bit older, and they don't necessarily see things like stylized work from animation to games or comics as an actual art form, which is my experience. Growing up in college and high school levels, those instructors never really promoted those things because they don't see them as valid forms of artwork. But my generation, who is now teaching, doesn't see it that way anymore, right? Because that's what we grew up with. And it's also not to say that learning that we shouldn't learn true art history, like not true, but art history within our culture. From the periods of classical periods and even older than that, right? So the idea for me is that you shouldn't cut yourself off to any form of creative thinking. Okay, we're gonna go into this glove and do a little bit of hatching inside here as well too. So this string would go underneath this gauntlet, but that's okay. There's some things that we'll do a little bit of editing on later on. I'll probably scan some of this stuff, edit a little bit of it. Or I can just put a little bit of white out in there. Jonathan's then asking, I've read that older artists tend to be settled down on limited medium palette, while the younger artists tend to be more experimental. I want to know if you went through something similar in your journey. Not really. When you're saying medium, limited mediums to palettes, are you talking about painting specifically, Jonathan? Or about the ideas of like art forms and the mediums of, let's say, um, the industry itself, right? Demanchi, that's a whole lecture. That would take hours if I go into specific details. If I gave you the simple, quick 5 second thing, I would say it's a lot of planning, tons of planning, okay, and then commit to the thumbnail process, right? Thumbnail once, twice, 3 times if you have to. Strategize and plan, write a lot, thumbnail, and then execute. But I know of comic artists today that have enough experience that they don't need to even do that. They just kind of go off their head, page after page. That to me like sounds crazy because comics are so hard. To art forms, yeah, I mean, in my youth growing up, I've come across instructors that were very much adamant to the way they've established things and where they come from, the respective art forms, right? Especially those that are more classically trained from the world of illustration and fine art and whatnot. And they don't necessarily work in the world of commercial art, right? Entertainment art. They don't work in those fields. So it doesn't really apply to them the same way. And that was the thing about growing up in education in my time period is that the influx of young people interested in the entertainment world of commercial art and design was just beginning to really take hold. Um, and so we had to be trained using traditional methods and trying to find a way to adapt them into, current methods and means of application in the industry. But because of that, there was a conflict within that path where being trained by more traditional minded people, they're going to have thoughts on how you should be done. But because they don't have the experience in working in those fields, for the young students, it's very confusing. They're telling me one thing, but I'm hearing another based on like what the industry kind of needs. So it's less of that today, but definitely a lot more of it when I was coming up. Oh, in terms of like how I put it out there, I used the Kickstarter. I self-published it. I didn't go through a publisher. Pretty much every single one of my books in the past have been self-published. The only book I've actually published through somebody was the Dynamic Bible book through Super Ronnie. So my own comic that I just did with the blacksmith, I obviously wrote it, illustrated it, designed the book, and then put it on Kickstarter, printed it, distributed it, got it out there, and also marketed it. I did everything myself. So of course having a social media platform helps. and taking advantage of all those fields. Kickstarter is just another social media platform. Okay, let me move this a little bit. Go back to this side. This order that was from an earlier sketch that I sent out to the client. So in the beginning, I talked about I had done thumbnails and early sketches to give to the client to tell them what it is idea wise, and they chose a couple things. So this piece I'm doing now is the outcome from those thumbnails. So that image that I posted up was more one of the thumbnails. So I talked about that earlier in the beginning of the stream about this particular piece having come from earlier iterations that the client had certain requirements for. So I had shown a couple of those iterations to make sure the piece I'm doing now as a final one has all the elements they need. Methods for building a visual library for drawing mechs will draw a lot of mechanical things, things like actual props, vehicles, robots, actual robots that exist today, and looking at it from both from the larger sense of perspective, not perspective, proportion and the elements of how they're put together to the intricacies of details, right? So you obviously have to practice drawing those many, many times, and it has an ongoing effort. It doesn't stop. And then from there, you also then look at stylized things, how other people that have designed mechs in the past. For me, a lot of Japanese artists, of course, mech designs where it comes from, and I used to draw those mechs constantly. So I'm mixing and matching, having an understanding of the real world and seeing how stylized world is being done. I'm able to produce my own stuff, being inspired by those elements. So I'm off the page again. Uh, let's shift over to the other archer just to stay within the frame. Question here. What key advice would I give to someone who wants to start their freelance career? Uh, it's a difficult start because it has a combination of things that are out of your control, things like luck and timing, unfortunately. You just have to have, just having submit the work at the right time in the right place, hopefully having the right person have seen it. Of course, it starts off with yes, producing portfolio, making sure your work is competitive. Whatever training method you have to go through, you would do so, and you would submit the work to different companies and whatnot and clients you could find online. So you would go to the websites of companies and corporates and ask for things like freelance work if they have any, and that takes a bit of a hustle and bustle to get to that point. Networking is a huge portion of it, right? But from the networking and collecting all the experiences behind the techniques, from there, like I said, luck and timing. Hopefully, a project comes your way that is just the right format that fits their needs, based on your visual look or I guess your techniques and methods. Finding the right person, that can kind of send you up to those channels, um, and starting off small initially. The initial projects you'll get may not be these really big projects that are going to be like character designs and whatnot. It might have to be like small little props and things that aren't kind of menial busy work that you don't really like to do, but it's a way to get started. Just to get some of the experience, and really one of the key advices also is that your role and job is not about trying to get only let's say work that you have to get paid for. I'm not saying you just work for free. What I'm saying is you have to start building content that goes in your portfolio that proves your ability to work with clients, right? So yeah, maybe it's paid, maybe sometimes it's not paid very well. But the idea is in the very beginning, you have to start pulling up this sort of, visual content experience that shows that you can do that kind of stuff. And so then the more eyes you have on the portfolio, they see evidence of how your application goes, where it's not only just student work, right? My first freelance gig out of school, it took me 4 months to find it. 4 months of constantly looking, applying to a bunch of jobs, and I found a freelance job. And they asked me to do a bunch of vehicle designs, but they're kind of like it was for a game, like a mobile game or something like that. And the vehicles were kind of like background vehicles, and they weren't really that you know interesting to actually do. But I had to do it. It didn't pay the greatest, but I started there, and then I went to another company afterwards. About a couple months after that, that asked me to do another set of vehicle designs, and that was more like actual primary vehicles and military stuff. It was for a game called Warhawk for the PS3 back in the day, and I worked a contract and freelance for that. Pay was also average, if not a little bit less than average. I started on there, but then they hired me full time, and then that's how I got my full time gigs and started working towards it. This is back in 05, 2005. But at the beginning, the freelance gigs that I got were relatively just kind of menial, basic, and sometimes not that great. But it got me started, and then from there, I was able to kind of build up this, working relationship to things. So don't deny work based on the fact that first it may not be necessarily within your interest, you know, because the thing is, I did a bunch of vehicle designs, but vehicle design was not really my forte. It wasn't something I was super interested in. I wanted to do like creature and character designs, but I took those vehicle designs because I knew I could still do it. It wasn't really my main thing, but from there it evolved other stuff. It was a stepping stone, right? I actually wanted to work in animation before games, and that didn't work out. So as game opportunities came my way, I jumped on them. What else am I gonna do, right? I'm gonna fill all this in shadow shape right now, just silhouetting it. Owen's asking, I'm still in your teens. You're still in your teens, focusing on the fundamentals and foundations. Should I be concerned with creating my own style? No, too early. Don't need to. Keep focusing on fundamentals. Just keep having fun with what you're doing. It's okay to explore styles, but that shouldn't be your focus. To explore style is to, again, build a taste to your aesthetics by copying things and imitating stuff and producing things that are of stylings. Um, so it's okay to do that, but that shouldn't be the only thing you do. And I'm sure everyone here understands that everything I'm talking about is based on my own experiences. So I'm not saying this is the way you have to do it, by the way. At the end of it, you have to make your own decisions and you'll kind of go off in your own path. But I don't see these things based on just assumption. These are things that I've done. Okay. So I've copied a lot. I've looked at stylized work. I integrated it together, but I also practice a lot of fundamentals as well, too. More questions over here. Larry's asking, have I seen the work of David Finch? Yes, I have. Do I like it? He seems very technical and very standout compared to many other artists I've seen, just like my work too. Well, I don't know David personally, and I've grown up with his comic work in the past. I mean, I'm straight up forward. I mean, I think what he does is great. on social media because I've seen what he's done, producing videos and content that shows people how he approaches some of the fundamental techniques, which is great. If it helps people, fantastic. In terms of a personal styling that he has in his own work, I'm not the biggest fan of it. Like I wouldn't, you know, run out to find his work, essentially. I'm sure there are many people that do, and I'm sure he has a strong following, and so as long as he's helping people, that's always a good thing to see. He seems very genuine and very kind of like strong on presentation and stuff. So that's all great. But like I said, I've never been a big follower of his work. Um, a lot of it to me has to do with mostly his method of technique. It's very comic book approach. I'm not talking about his style. I'm talking about the way he does things. So I don't draw that way. I don't sketch that way. So because it doesn't align with my approach to how I produce things, I don't turn to it, right? So he tends to be a lot more just like search for things, through pencil, and he kind of inks things around, which is fine. I used to do that, but that's not really my thing anymore. Tips for someone ready to start your drawing their first comic? Well, make sure you planned out a good amount of the story before you start drawing the comic out, just so you know where you're going to go with it. Ted's asking, should art be a little messy and sketchy or strict and accurate? Depends on what you want. There is no right or wrong in that. It's what do you want? If you're saying, oh, I don't know what I want, well, then you got to keep searching for it. How do I search? Well, you research based on other people's work. What do you like about their stuff? What aesthetics you turn to? What responds to you, right? So go by your instincts, go by your exploration, and find out. Decision making is a hard thing to do. And I'm talking about on all levels, right? Decision making within what kind of job you want, how you educate yourself, what techniques you want to go for, what levels of visuals you want to have, but then also down to the very sketch and drawing. What shapes do I want? What line do I want to go for? What tools do I use? Everything's based on the decision you have to make. And so, how you build better decision making is to choose and decide and try things and fail if you have to, and then come to conclusions by repetition, right? Then you build up a number of data of information that you're able to mix and match or sift through and start to come to a conclusion to things, right? And so then from there, as you have a good idea, you repeat the process through experimentation and you come to a conclusion that is consistent. Then from that consistency, you're able to build a level of confidence, right? When drawing the whole Viking fight, then why don't you remind me of the piece? Which Viking fight one? I'm trying to remember myself. I'm thinking of one already, but I don't know if that's the one you're talking about. As there are no new questions right now, we're just going to keep sketching, drawing. I apologize if I tend to stop drawing and answer questions. I'm sure people want to keep seeing me produce more of it. I'm going to keep trying to sketch while I'm talking. Sometimes it's not because I'm trying to think of it so heavily, but I'm trying to really convey through clarity as to like what my answer is. Um, but I always just forget that time goes by pretty quickly. So we've already been going about hour and a half now. So we'll keep going for the moment. I would like to finish this live. There's really not that much more to do. I'm just now filling in some of the the elements of detail, hatching, darks. The drawing is done. I just have to fill in the darks now. This is just now time. This is all the easy stuff. It's a rainy day here in LA, which is always nice. I like rainy days. Cooler days are something I'm much more fond of than hot days. So it's good to stay indoors and sketch and draw. Still feeling something sickness wise. I feel it in my head. Stuffiness, not like congestion, but it just feels off. It's been like this for like 4 or 5 days. The pen I'm using right now, as people are asking, is this Kuretake Fude pen. This one here. This is in a package. It's a good pen. It's got two sides to it. One heavy brush stroke, one thinner side. Has a nice fine point nib, or a brush, I guess. Stiffer. It's not like an actual brush. It's a felt tip brush. Fude style, so it has a little bit of a sponginess to it. Gives you a lot of line flexibility. Okay, we're gonna go into this hand right here. Vando is saying, I remember advice from my art teacher in school that you wanted to share it. If you feel like you lack confidence, pick up an ink pen and draw with it. Don't touch pencil until you don't want to erase anymore. Well, yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with drawing pencils and erasing. I just think that you start to discover what it requires to build a confidence to something is where then turning to pen can be helpful. But it doesn't necessarily mean there's nothing inherently wrong with pencils and erasing. We want to be careful of demonizing certain methods and techniques because what it does is it creates a school and a camp of thought where then people get grouped. It's like, oh, you draw with pencil, then you're like this. Or you draw with ink, then you're that. We don't want to have that kind of thought. Each tool has a strength and a weakness to it. Each, even ink. So once you start to understand its parameters or requirements also necessary to really take advantage of, is when you start to really to express things that you want to. Pencil can produce beautiful things, and erasing is a fundamental practice on not just correcting mistakes, but an actual tool to be able to also add to the visual. And that's something you have to understand as well too, which I'm sure you all do. I'm not saying that this is the only way that people are being claiming this, but I'm just saying be careful of that. So yes, drawing with pen straight in does produce, or not produce, but it does put you in the position to be able to be mindful of things like line economy, line confidence, and stuff like that, if you have the right mentality in mind. Um, and that's where actual training and classes come into play. But if someone's just telling you this, saying don't draw with pencil, just draw with ink only, without really giving any sense of context of like, well, what does that actually even mean and how? Then what it does is it feels like that there's something in the ink or the pen itself that's supposed to naturally give you this. But the thing is that you can still build that same kind of line confidence and economy through pencil as well too. It's a mindset thing. It's not really the tool, but the tool can put you in a position to be aware of that sensitivity of thought. You know, I hope that makes sense. But that's the way I like to try to convey it in my own classes when I require people to use felt tip pens and pen in my classes. Demachi Dave is asking, how can you draw a bunch of characters in just one page? What really is going on in your mind at this time? On this particular page or in general, Demachi? Because if you're talking about a bunch of characters on a page, it depends again situation. Is it within a context of space and perspective, or is it more based on some sort of like illustration, a collage of characters? Because both of them are similar of result with multiple characters on the page, but they require different approaches. I don't like the Sakura felt tips. Who knows? They're just the felt tip brush pens from Sakura and Faber-Castell. The edges and the nib or the points on the brush pens don't hold up. They fray because they're softer. They're not as compact. The fibers in the felt on the end of the pieces here, these are a little bit stiffer and much more compressed. And they retain that shape a lot better. But the felt tip brush pens from like Sakura or Faber Castell, they'll fray on you real fast. And those I don't use. Brian's asking, I find that I'm tired, sore after drawing for after even 30 minutes. Do you ever get sore? If not, how did you learn not to? So it's a good question, Brian, actually. It's not a new question. It actually is a good question because you have to understand what's actually going on. For the experienced individual, I mean, the typical answer, I don't want to stop drawing asking. The typical answer would be about, well, you just practice more. You just have to get used to it. And my answer wouldn't differ really that much, but it's not really about the answer. It's more about understanding why that's happening. And for me, I call it endurance, sketching endurance or drawing endurance. And it has to do with the fact that when you're feeling tired or sore, is because you haven't really built up the muscle memory nor the endurance in your hand to hold up to the pressure of that. Now, what I'm talking about is that, well, I'll have to show you. In the hands, this is from my left to right hand. In my right hand, you'll notice that indent and the little bump right there. It's kind of depressed right now. And this is something that all artists have to a degree, right? That callus that built up on the bone, on the area for where the pen is actually being pressed on top of. And this is just natural pressure, right? As you hold the pen, for myself, I'm holding it more classical writer style, standard writer style grip, that the index finger and the thumb are putting pressure onto the middle finger. So these are the areas of point and pinch, and it pushes on top of the middle finger itself. This is then the platform that the pen is sitting on top of. So some people have it on the ring finger, some people have it on the middle finger, depending on how you hold the pen. Some people hold the pen like this, like that, and it places the pen pressure in different parts. Now, I know that this can yield varying results of time spent on how much you can sketch to the point until it feels painful, right? I can go a long while, hours, without this being sore or hurting. I can feel a bit of like, soreness in the knuckles from inflammation or just, stiffness. So I have to kind of take a couple breaks here and there and stretch my hands and whatnot. But here I have no pain, you know. But the thing is, this is when people ask about like my left hand drawing, and I will draw with my left hand once in a while. And when I draw with my left hand, I'm also doing this as well too. And so the pen is sitting on top of the middle finger, but because there is no platform here, no built up callus, this starts to get hurt quite a bit, even after only like 20 minutes of sketching. I can't draw as long with my left hand compared to my right. It's because it hasn't been built up endurance wise compared to the right. So all that means to me is time. If I spent just a bit more time, even if it's in stretches of 20, 30 minutes at a time, taking breaks in between that, it will eventually build. Now, if this was my dominant hand and I'm starting now, it will take some time to get there. But that's really the only answer. I can't force this, right, to feel better about it. It's got to build up to that temperament. So even over here, doing warm ups and exercises I'd offer in my classes are a big part of that. But I also understand this because I can take it for granted. And when somebody tells me that's like, oh, maybe you have to like find a better tool set, or maybe you have to find a better grip, or maybe it's your sitting position. Those are certain things that can make an effect to it as well too, for sure. But what happens is that you forget about how it feels, how painful it can be, you know? Because I feel no pain in this part of the right hand. So when somebody tells me after 30 minutes my hand hurts, it's like, well, is it because you're stiff or maybe to stretch more or whatever the case is? But it's just simply the idea that the pressure could be a part of it. And so when you feel it, as I do in my left hand, I remind myself, like, oh, it actually does hurt. I can see why now students who are beginning to learn how to draw in the beginning of their stages, whether they're younger or older, no matter what age you are, that pain is very real, and something that I've forgotten about. So I remind myself of that. But how do I overcome it at that point is about being able to just obviously now stick with it, right? Time will be the solution, and that's then the answer that everybody gives. But usually having understanding of like why it does hurt is because you just haven't built up the endurance to it. Um, so certain exercises will hopefully help you in that. But then taking classes are really the key, right? Let me read this question first and I'll keep drawing. Can you elaborate on how the dynamic sketching extension class builds on the regular dynamic sketching class? Is tone, paper, pen still required in the medium? Yes. So the extension class that I don't offer right now, but may offer in the future. In my dynamic sketching is the basics and fundamentals of what I teach right now, but the extension version was something that was a requested by students in the past. So this was due to the fact that we only have so much time in a single course, 8 weeks, and in the 8 weeks we can't cover everything in terms of subject matter, in terms of techniques and stuff like that. So people requested an extension class that basically just took the original dynamic sketching class and just extended time. So all I did was I added additional subject matters, but then I also incorporated other things, different materials. We covered things like watercolors, ink wash techniques, dry brushing techniques. So I started to interject, different methods of approach of sketching and drawing. Then we also talked about creativity. Well, how do I explore creativity? If I draw the things I do every day and I break them down into shapes and forms, well, what do I do with them, right? How do I explore my creativity in that idea? So then the dynamic sketching extension class also got into that, creative sketching. And then we also got into things like, storytelling a little bit here and there, and application within the work, whether it's the illustration work or things like it could be applied towards graphic novels or it could be applied towards illustration in different ways. I know I just said that, but still, it had extensions beyond just basic training of drawing and sketching every day, but also thinking about like, where it can go to, how it applies, and then different materials that can back it up, essentially. But that's not being offered right now. So the reason why I'm not offering it at the moment is because it requires a certain pool of people. And when I go through all the students who have taken dynamic sketching prior and taken that class, there's no other students because I require students having had taken the first dynamic sketching before they take the extension class. So if there's no students to take the extension class because they haven't taken the first one, it just sits there. The best thing you guys can do for me, I tell this to my students as well too, is to help me out by sharing that my class registration is open. Put it on your social media feed, share it to a story, something like that for me. That way, I can keep these kind of classes and live streams going. If these classes in the future for this year don't fill up, it's hard to maintain because there's no reason to hold on to it if I can't get students to come in. It's not because people aren't interested; it's because the timing of this day and age is tough because spending money on education where things of inflation are making it hard. I can understand that. But if I have to, then I have to go to the certain schools that can bring in students because they have actual established platforms and have to go to those middlemen again. But I would rather not want to do that. I want to stay online myself, preferably. But of course, it's not as an independent artisan, educator. It can be difficult to maintain a consistent flow of people. So far, this session is started up. Registration just got started, so we'll see how it goes. I expect it to do just fine, but you never know. So I say this mainly because I just want to make sure people can, support as best they can. So I read some of the past questions or missed questions. Do I prefer the Loomis method or the Riley method? Both are great. It's all based on what you prefer. And once you start to practice within it, what clicks for you. And sometimes you can also start to mix and match things together. So sticking with one or the other really isn't for me, but I like both methods. And I like to pull from bits and pieces of each of them. Let's see. Dimanshi's also asking bunch of characters fighting against each other, at least 10 of them on a large scale size of sketchbook. I mean, yeah, it's difficult no matter what, especially when you have that much activity and figures going on in a single page. For someone who's producing something for, let's say, a client or some kind of freelance job, for that one, you're going to want to do a lot of thumbnailing, a lot of preemptive study, individual figures, planning out thumbnails and compositions because it's a job that you're being hired to do. But if it's my own piece, a lot of times I would just go straight in there. But a lot of it is also then, like I said, building up to that sense of comfort. Maybe starting with two figures at a time, doing a lot of illustrations that show interaction. From there, two to three figures, right? And then from there, you build up from there. But within that kind of composition of multiple figures, do know that having a sense of focus really helps as well. Focus as to where the eye needs to go. Because you might have 10 figures on there, but should the eye look at everything at once? Or should I be looking at something more specific, right? And all the other figures can be there as support, if anything else. It's like a primary read, secondary read, third read kind of thing. Have I read any artist biographies I would recommend? Not really. I've watched artist documentaries, but not a lot of books on biographies on artists. Um, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of books based on like fine artists and artists within popular culture and stuff like that. But within the entertainment design world, you don't really see a lot of biographies based on them, even if they are big as like Mobius or people like that, right? Um, but in terms of like documentaries, you'll find some interesting ones. Guys like Frazetta has a really interesting documentary. Um, but I really can't think of that anymore. Really, I don't know about artist biography, but a documentary based on like a production would be like Jodorowsky's Dune, which is a really good one as well too. Appreciate that, Miris. Thanks for the comments and thoughts. What do I think about Heinrich Clay? I mean, there's so many thoughts based on Heinrich Clay. I did a whole, not a whole, but a partial Q&A presentation with Marshall Vandroff during the Lightbox Expo last year in November, where we talked about Heinrich Clay quite a bit um, because he is a favorite of both of ours. So we had discussions about artists that we favored and what we really pull from them. And so Heinrich Clay definitely is up there for me in terms of an artist that I favor quite a bit. And he was a bit of a late discovery for me, based on the fact that I found him during college, and I find that to be a late discovery because of the fact that I think artists today are being introduced to things so much quicker than before. So for me, I found them at my mid 20s, I would say, around that time. Um, Not to say that's that late, but still, yeah. No, his work when I first saw it definitely blew me away. It was a visual result in which I didn't understand how I could even understand to learn or to incorporate. And I knew there was something there that I really, really favored. But at the time, I didn't know what it was. Today, I have a lot more, specific details of how I would verbally communicate that. But again, I'm not going to spend an hour talking about that right now. But all I will say is that I do appreciate his work quite a bit. Yeah. Etienne's asking, do you think not safe for work art, adult work or risque work, hurts your chances in the industry? Um, it's an interesting question because it's not the kind of work that I do, and I have nothing against, work like that, adult work or anything like this. If it's based on your audience, your niche, your interests, and your pursuits, go for it. If you have an industry that you can work in that can help you be successful within that medium or I guess subject matter, great. Continue to really take advantage of it. But for myself, I would say if you're working in an industry that doesn't really focus in on stuff like that, then it's not like you can really use that work right in a portfolio or to show it on like social media or to put it on a website or something like this. Again, you could if that was your main interest of focus and you're trying to gain an audience based on that. But if you're saying that's the work that I do, but I'm also now trying to work at an animation studio like Nickelodeon, then it's not going to work, you know? Even in certain game industries and game industries and also films that can have more adult themed kind of stories and whatnot, you might assume that you can just put together that kind of work. But the thing is, each studio doesn't only produce one type of story, you know, and they might have a certain look, but they can produce all kinds of worlds, you know, and some of them will be more or less than others. And once that project is done, are they gonna make another one just like that again? Maybe, maybe not, you know. So as you apply for that company and you submit that kind of work, thinking that's the kind of stuff they've done, well, they may not do that again, you know. So it's always based on being able to read their upcoming projects at times, and you don't know all the time, but that's something you have to kind of be careful of because if you assume that's all they do, you might have missed your boat already at that point. That's if you're looking for that kind of work, right? But like I said, in that situation, it's going to be more, I think, an independent choice because even if you're looking at it from an industry standpoint, maybe if you go to like graphic novel storytelling, you'll find a lot more of that area of audience within. You can do like a webtoon series or webcomics kind of stuff. You can publish it or make art books within. And again, it can be popular and also well received. But it's still very much you being an independent artist, right? Going through like publishers, yeah, you can probably find that, but like commercial work or let's say film, animation, and game, a lot more niche, a lot more minimal in terms of opportunities, I would say. So it's not wrong to focus on it. It's just more of a thought of like, you know, making sure you're aware of your intent based on where you're trying to go with it. Oh yeah, John Albert. Yeah, Marshall loves Heinrich Clay. Okay, I think we're gonna shift the camera or the piece down a little bit here. We're actually almost done. I just have the lower half, and I'm gonna be pretty much complete. We're gonna give it about maybe another, maybe half an hour at the most. So if anybody has any further questions, comments, thoughts, do share anytime. The next time I'll be on live, I'm not sure. I think I'll be pretty active actually this January because I don't start classes until February. So I'll actually be a lot more active this month than any other month upcoming. I just have to get over this slight sickness a little bit. Then if you once I feel 100%, I'll probably be a lot more active. Like right now, I'm pushing it a little bit, but we'll see. I'm hoping by next week it'll be really cleared up. Something is lingering. So, question here is I recommended one of the perspective classes to a certain student here, and you never found one that you liked. You know, do you think it would be counterproductive to take it again? Um, you mean the same perspective course or just perspective in general? Because if it's about a perspective course, I would say take one with another person, another instructor. If you found the current one you have taken to be not as uh, likable connection wise. So I would say look for another class within the same fundamental as another kind of experience again. Hopefully another one will click a little bit better, but you will need to really settle upon one that you can really start to kind of like, oh, my dynamic sketching course. I mean, it'll help no matter what. Will it help in perspective? To a degree, but it's mostly about your ability to visualize shape and form, right? Um, so you know that's something that you have to kind of think about. It's not really perspective as per se, but you know, in my recommendation, I think if you found one experience with a perspective course not to be your liking, I wouldn't just resort to that one experience because it will stick with you in that way, experience wise, and you always have a bit of a sour taste to perspective. So it would be good if you can really find a perspective course that could be very favorable to you. I know it's not a guarantee, but I would say giving it a chance one more time at some point in the future would be helpful, whenever that would be. You know, is it okay if you didn't take perspective? If it's for my class, like I said, there are many people that have taken my dynamic sketching class without perspective, and they can still draw things easy. You know, and build their skill sets. But in terms of your overall growth, if you haven't taken perspective, I would definitely still recommend you take one for sure. I mean, I would recommend. I don't know which one you took or the one that you were looking at. I mean, the one I would probably recommend is still Polina over at CDA. She's a good instructor. She's been teaching as long as I have, and I've known her since my art center days. From her at Brainstorm, there's the perspective boot camps with like Charles, I think Lynn, and a couple other people. If you can take a class with Eric Ing, Eric NG, I believe he teaches his own classes online. Maybe he mostly teaches at art center, but he might have his own stuff online. What do I think about Disney putting in gay moments in kids' movies? If it's helping to the story, I don't care. You know, if it's it shouldn't be forced to only meet the demands of certain things. For me, it's about story. If it works within the story itself, I have no problem about things like gender or sexual orientation and stuff like that. As I said, there has to be intent as to how things are designed and storytelling wise. But just because we have that kind of stuff and it's just kind of forced in there, I mean, it's like whatever. If people are happy about it, great. But if it's not something I can enjoy watching because it's not well designed, then to me it doesn't really matter. But I would hope there to be a lot more thought put into it, right? Because I think it deserves that sort of respect and I guess thought behind put into those kind of things, even if it is meant to be a kids movie. Just because it's a kids medium as a game or a movie or a comic doesn't mean it can't have thought put into it, right? And that's why I don't like when people talk about like certain movies and say, well, it doesn't need to be very good. It was initially designed for kids. Like, well, what does that mean? Why does that mean that it can't be a good thing or a well designed thing or well structured thing in story? One of the main pieces like Star Wars. People complain about Star Wars right now all the time, but people respond to that. Well, it wasn't made for you. It was made for kids. But like that doesn't make any sense to me. A Star Wars movie isn't just only for kids. In my perspective, it's a story based on how anybody can respond to. So that response doesn't really is it's not a proper response to me. It's just poor storytelling. You know, it doesn't matter who the characters are, where they come from, or what they are, as long as they're told well, right? It's a lot of thought put into it and structured properly. And yeah, that's really for everything for me. A couple of the questions here is Brian. Biggest problem is starting to draw. I've always facing the fear, reality that what I'll draw won't be good. I'm trying to draw, but that blank canvas haunts you. Tips. It's a big question because it's a common theme and feeling that all of us will feel. Uh, you can look at other artists and think that well they don't seem to have that problem. You, myself, you don't seem to have that problem. You can't. I'm not going to say that right now I have that issue where I look at this piece of paper and I have a fear behind what I produce is going to be bad or good or whatever the case is. I have no more of those thoughts. This piece here, it people are gonna ask like, do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? It's not about good or bad. That I just do my job, right? Does it fit the parameters of things that I need to do for this piece? And can it be made better? Always. Even if it was other people's thoughts of like that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. Could it be always be better from there? Of course it could, based on other people's subjective opinions. Based on my own opinion, this could be better in another round. Is it bad? Well, no, but there are mistakes. But are mistakes bad to me? Not necessarily. So it's a mindset thing as well too. So I don't look for bad things. I look for mistakes based on how I can learn from them. So then mistakes are necessary, right? But you might think, but that piece you're producing is for somebody. You have to make sure it's perfect, right? It's like, well, not really, because no piece I produce is gonna be perfect. Every single piece I produce, even if it's something paid for, is also a learning experience, right? So then if I know that I can't be perfect and I know that I'm not going to be able to control that and I'm always going to be able to learn, then I'm able to release that sense of fear because I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to experience in many ways. um, and it will become better each time around. It never ends. It continues that route through your lifespan, right? And that's the thing about this is that there's never a point when you feel like, oh, I'm good enough now. I'm ready and I'm going to be the best that I can be. It's like, why would you even want that? Why would you ever want this peak point of a mountain? Because you can climb and you might think there has to be some sort of goal where it ends at some point where all of a sudden that's it. You got everything you need. I don't want that, right? I want to focus on less of it being an actual peak and more about the actual path that I'm on to keep building, right? So yes, it never ends, but some people see that as exhaustion. It's like, oh, that sounds so tiring and annoying. It's like, but I don't see it that way. Again, mindset's different. I don't see it as drudgery. I see it as excitement, discovery of new things, right? So it's less than on fear and more on the sense of enthusiasm. And what that does is it perpetuates a sense of constant movement. You want to keep producing, you want to keep drawing, you want to keep making more because you're looking for that new thing you're going to find, that next discovery, that next new thing of enjoyment. And once you feel that and you're able to retain that mentality and focus with the current, and it never ends, then whatever you produce at that point, you're never going to feel bad about because then you're always looking forward to the next thing, right? And somebody else can come in there and judge and critique, and oh, that's terrible, that's not good. What does it matter, right? They're not the ones doing it. They're not the ones actually on that path, right? All they can do is maybe say something, and they can easily critique. But what does it say about their working methods? What does it say about their personality, right? And so at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because you don't know who they are. They don't have any connection to you in the real world. They're just people online. So none of that stuff has any judgment or weight upon the things you do for yourself, whether for yourself or work, right? But we're humans, and it's hard for us to, you know, uh, not take things so personal and not be emotionally connected to things as well too. We want to be validated. We want to be accepted. We want to feel like we're doing good things because we care. So how could we not want to, do so well on things like that? But I think that's the way we all begin. But there has to be this sort of change to the thought process because that's how we all can start as humans. But to me, that's the baseline. You know, the thought that yeah, we care because that's obvious. We do care, but then there's more beyond that. You know, in terms of how you can really not take advantage, but really experience this truthfully for yourself, where then it's no longer about anything else around you. Everything else quiets down. It just becomes about you and you putting it together and discovering things and bringing yourself to the next levels for you yourself only. You know, at the end of the day, those people that are critiquing or saying things are not next to you. It's you at the table, piece of paper in front of you, the only one doing it. That's what matters. And then from there, can you do it every single day? Because then it's no longer than just a job. It's something you do because you love to do it. It is more than just work. It's like this piece right here I'm making. It's for somebody. We did a trade of an actual skill. I'm not getting paid for it. I didn't pay him for this bow that he made me. We just appreciate what we do in our lives. He makes these amazing bows in archery, and so he was like, I'll make you a bow, and I would love to have some art from you. It's like, sure, I would love what you make, and I'll make something for you if you feel if it's an equal trade. And we've come to this, kind of like conclusion. We came together. So he seems like a great guy, and he's based up in, like I said, in Canada. He makes these amazing archery bows, long bows and style, and he's made me two bows already. Sent them over to me, and I love using them. It's an everyday thing that I have, and then I want to send them these pieces. So it's not like I'm actually even getting paid for it, but I love to do this. And he was like afterwards. This is a couple of days ago. He actually asked me. He's like, "Hey, would you mind? It's like, how much would you charge if I sent you a bow and you could draw on them?" I was like, "Well, I'm not gonna charge you for that. It's like send me the bows. I'll draw on them because I like to do it. It's fun." He's like, "Oh, really? You won't charge?" I was like, "Why would I charge you?" Um, I'm not trying to gain anything monetarily wise from that guy because I appreciate his passions and I appreciate his work ethic and what he loved to do in his life, which is to create beautiful bows. So I'm going to celebrate in that. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. See the full image. Sorry for the shake. More reviews of pens and stuff like this. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind. It's just that how many more pens can I really review? You know, what are there? What other pens would you like to see? I guess is the question, Vinicus. You know, because I've done reviews on felt tip pens and brush pens and fountain pens. Like, well, I guess I can just continue reviewing other pens that I've used before, but I don't really use that many more. You know, but if you guys have recommendations or things you like to see more of, I mean, that's the way to help me because I don't know. I find that when I do reviews of stuff, I tend to just repeat myself over and over again. It's like, well, how many times can I just say the same thing about the same tool, you know? And not to say that it doesn't help people. It's just that I also want to make content that I find that I'm invested in on. And I guess tools to me are not really as interesting to talk about, where I rather just start using them in videos like this. So this is the Kuretake brush pen. So this is a great tool. It's not that expensive. It's not a water resistant ink. Handles pretty well. I like the longer kind of like structure of it. Um, it's actually the ink on this is actually a lot darker than these zebra pens. It's a bit different value to it. Got a bit of a deeper richness to black. So Halo gear, that's kind of what it's for. He wanted some artwork that he can use for things like shirts and stickers and stuff like that. So that's what this is for. That's why it's designed to be this cape coming across. I didn't do the full body. The previous thumbnail, I had him on full body, but he didn't want that. So that's why I'm doing this piece. It was a bit of a attempt and a readjustment from the piece I had shown him before. He goes by Heritage Bow Works for those of you that are interested in bows. He's a cool guy. You can definitely go check out his Instagram. You'll see some of his archery stuff. If you're also looking for like subject matter for like people like him drawing the bow and drawing people like that, that can be also fun too for reference. Okay, we're almost done here. Last bits of line information. It's about 2:19 our time right now. Last 5-10 minutes. If anybody has any last other comments or questions, let me know. Again, just to remind you guys, class registrations are open currently. So if you guys are interested in taking courses with me this current session, consider it. If not, that's okay. But maybe what you can do is help me out by sharing some of the information. Go to my Instagram or take the website link and just kind of share it on your posts. If you've taken it before, that would be the best thing to do for me because you've already experienced it beforehand. And I will hopefully be on real soon again as a live stream, maybe this week. Actually, I have a trip I got to do on Thursday to see Marshall Vandruff. So I'm doing some work with him on Thursday. Friday, I have a couple meetings. So maybe middle of this week or beginning of next week, probably. I'm still also planning to release a podcast real soon. Look for that to come up within this month, I would say. Um, it's already kind of set up. I just have to get the intro done, little intro piece for the videos. I'm trying to finish and finalize. I'm waiting for some music to come together. Um, and I need to do a couple more sessions with my friend Manny. And once we kind of get those into the tape, I'm hoping to release that starting this month. I would like to do it sooner than later. I mentioned that last time in the streams, but that's still on the pipeline and coming down the way some point soon. The podcast will be just more discussions between me and my friend Manny. We just sit and talk about things about art, and travel, and we talk to some guests here and there at times. Um, so hopefully that'll come out real soon. A little bit of a heavier line weight around this silhouette just to wrap things up. I still got to do a little bit of tightening up in a couple of spots here and there, but this is practically done. Owen's asking, you mentioned that you're drawing and studying the fundamentals. However, most of the exercise you're doing are training your observation skills. How would I train myself to draw from imagination? Well, it starts off from the observation. Okay, so if you're sketching things like humans or animals or vehicles or props based on observation of the real world, then you have to go into the imagination world by taking things you've seen and being able to creatively either manipulate it, mix it together, or create something inspired by those subjects, right? So take something you've seen before and just slightly change it. Adjust it for something else. It doesn't have to be design oriented. It's not design. Creative sketching or imagination sketching is being able to come up with something, but based on something you've seen beforehand. But do a lot of observational sketching. Try to draw from multiple angles of things you've seen, so you have a collection of data based on shape, form, and turning of in space. And then from there, start to imagine how you can manipulate it to be creatively different, or mix it with other stuff. Okay. But you shouldn't stop the observational drawing. That is the key to building a visual library that will help also continue to give you the ammo, the fuel for inspiration or imagination. Okay, it's about 12:23. How much time we spent? Yeah, Dimanche, I am almost at 50,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is surprising to me because I didn't really expect my YouTube to go anywhere really. Not that it really is at this point. It's just I just use it as a channel for live streams like this. Um, so it's not like a number that it's gonna be anywhere. I mean, I don't know. We'll see where it goes. I didn't expect it to go anywhere really. And we'll see if it grows continually going down the pipeline. I think I just have to be consistent about doing these kind of live streams more and more as I go through this year. This year or this last year was where a lot of the growth happened because I was doing so much of it on my Twitch, and Twitch streams were fine, but it wasn't really growing as much because at that time I wasn't again on streams as much as I was now. But I decided to kind of consolidate everything onto just YouTube because I didn't like having multiple platforms and stuff like this, and I just want to keep it more centralized. So we're gonna stick with mostly just YouTube for the moment in the future, but stick around for the future as well too in general, because more will be coming, more live streams. Like I said, the podcast will be coming real soon. Any recommendations or reviews, put them in the comments. Things you want to know more about, let me know because that way I know what to look for in terms of like what to research and reference to. But if not, we can always just kind of jump into these and ask questions, and interact more if anything else, and we'll keep going for the rest of the year. But in any case, this is our first live stream of 2023. Welcome to those for the first time, and we'll do more of these kind of like sessions where I can sketch and talk with you guys. I might do card breaks again in the future. I don't know just yet. That's more personal for me. I'll probably, if anything else, retain it to this and also drawing together sessions using the what is that? The damn it, that one program. I've already forgotten the name of it. Um, you guys know what I'm talking about. But in any case, um, we'll keep going from there. If any other last questions, let me know. But if not, thank you guys for this current session. I will see you all next round. For those of you that have been current students on the Discord, again, stay in touch with each other there. Talk with each other as much as you can. Um, Mango Studio, thank you. That's what it was. Mango Studio. That's what we'll use next time. But anyways, have a good night, you guys. I will see you all next time. Appreciate it.